He was down to his last shot at turning his life around. But when he stopped to help a stranger in heels, he missed the interview that could have changed everything. What he didn't know was she already had the power to rewrite his future. Quinton Raye didn't own a clock, but he didn't need one. His body was trained like muscle memory, up by 5 a.m. every day. He sat up slowly from the flattened futon cushion laid on the hardwood floor of a friend's one-bedroom in Tulsa. It wasn't his place, not really, but for the past 4 months it had been the only roof he could count on. The air was cool, and the silence was heavy, but he moved with purpose. He turned on the stove and placed a rusted kettle over the flame. There wasn't any coffee, but he wasn't after that. He needed steam, enough to press the only button-up shirt he owned. Pale blue, with a frayed collar and a missing cuff button. But if you ironed it just right, it looked like it belonged in an office. He didn't complain. Quinton never did. Complaints didn't pay bills. They didn't get you interviews, and they sure didn't fix a resume with a 2-year gap that started the same day his mom passed and ended with an eviction notice. He pressed the shirt carefully, breathing in the warmth, the wet air filling the kitchen like a memory. Then he moved to his shoes, black leather, cracked at the sides, but still whole. He dabbed a towel in cooking oil and rubbed the surface, just enough to catch a faint shine. Interview at 10. Don't be late, he muttered to himself in the cracked mirror. By 7:30, he was out the door, a half-eaten granola bar in his pocket. Bus fare in coins, borrowed from Mr. Lawton downstairs, a retired veteran who spent most days watching old westerns at full volume. Quinton had promised to pay him back the moment he got hired. He walked to the bus stop with his head up. He wasn't going to let desperation show. He'd read somewhere, maybe on a job site, that how you carry yourself matters more than your resume. So he carried himself like someone with options, not like someone who hadn't had a steady paycheck in over a year. It was a cool morning in Tulsa, the sky still half dim, and the sidewalks still mostly empty. He walked the last 2 blocks instead of transferring to a second bus, partly to save the fare, mostly to clear his head. Each step forward was like rehearsing a line. What are your strengths? I'm dependable. I show up. I care. What's your biggest weakness? I never ask for help, even when I need it. Why do you want this job? Because I want a chance to build something I can be proud of. The building came into view just before 9:30. Glass panels, sharp corners, DuPont Grove's Tulsa branch. It wasn't one of those big skyscrapers you see in cities on TV, but it still looked out of place for someone like him. Still, Quinton stood straighter as he approached. This was it. But just a few steps before the crosswalk, something odd caught his attention. A woman, elegant, well-dressed, balancing a designer tote in one hand and a coffee cup in the other, was stuck. Not frozen or panicked. Literally stuck. One of her heels had slipped into a crack between the sidewalk panels near the corner of Elm and 14th. She tried pulling her foot out, but the heel was deep and the angle was awkward. Cars slowed, some honked. She looked down, then around. Frustrated, probably embarrassed. Quinton didn't think about it. He just stepped forward. But just as he reached her, his pocket buzzed. He ignored it. He had a decision to make. Fast. Quinton didn't even hesitate. The suit, the bus fare, the interview, all of it faded for a second. Need a hand? He asked, crouching without waiting for a yes. The woman glanced down, startled. Up close, she looked like someone who'd never missed a hair appointment. Tight bob, clean makeup, silk blouse under a navy trench coat. Probably late 30s. Maybe older, but composed. The kind of woman who walks into a room and makes people straighten up without saying a word. I don't know what happened, she said, trying to laugh it off. But her voice had that edge of panic that people carry when they're trying not to show it. No worries, Quinton said, kneeling and gently gripping the base of her heel. You're stuck right in the crack. Got it deep, too. She braced herself against a nearby pole while he worked. Watch the cars, she muttered, more to herself than to him. I swear, people drive like maniacs down here. Quinton smiled as he shifted the heel side to side. Yeah, They don't slow down for anybody unless there's sirens. The shoe wouldn't budge at first. It was wedged tight, and the rubber from the sole had started to peel. The woman grimaced as she looked at it. "I just bought these," she said, sighing. "5th pair this month." Quinton chuckled. "I've had these shoes since junior year of high school. Can't imagine going through 5 in a month." There was a pause. She looked down at him, then softened a little. "You in a rush?" He didn't answer right away. A part of him wanted to say yes, that he had an interview, that he might be late, that this might be the only shot he had to get his foot in the door. But instead he gave a quiet, honest, "Sort of. But I'm not leaving you stuck here." With one more twist, the heel popped free. She stumbled slightly, and he caught her elbow just in time. "There we go," he said. "Thank you," she exhaled, adjusting her shoe. "Seriously, I thought I was going to have to yank my foot out and go barefoot." "That'd be one way to make an entrance." She smiled now, for real. "What's your name?" "Quinton," he said, standing upright and brushing off his pants. "Quinton Raye. Well, Quinton Raye, thank you. I owe you one." She checked her watch and winced. "I'm actually late myself." Then she took off, weaving through the crowd with the kind of stride that didn't invite further conversation. Just like that, she was gone. Quinton finally looked at his own watch. 9:54. His chest tightened. The interview was at 10. The building was still across the street. He ran, dodging a delivery truck and nearly dropping his resume folder. The receptionist's desk came into view as he burst through the front doors, trying to hide his panic behind a forced smile. "Hi, I'm here for an interview," he said, out of breath. "With DuPont Grove. 10 o'clock. Name's Quinton Raye." The receptionist looked at him calmly, then at her computer screen. She clicked a few times, then gave a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mr. Raye. Miss Ames was only scheduled until 10. She's already stepped out." Quinton blinked. "Wait, can you check? I helped someone on the street. It was just a few minutes." "She left about 5 minutes ago." "I'm sorry." He stood there, still holding the folder like it had weight, like it meant something. His breath was shallow, but he forced it down. He didn't want to look angry or desperate. He forced a smile, the same one he practiced in mirrors, and nodded once. "Thank you." He walked out slowly this time, careful not to let the door swing too hard behind him. The world outside felt louder now. The buses seemed faster, the sun hotter. He sat down on the same bench he passed earlier, letting the folder rest on his knees. For a moment, he let the thought enter. Maybe I blew it. Maybe I should have kept walking. But then he thought of that woman, how embarrassed she looked, how nobody else even stopped. And even though his hands were sweating and his stomach was empty, he told himself, doing the right thing doesn't always come with a reward, but it's still the right thing. Quinton stayed on that bench for a long time. He watched people stream in and out of the office building like it was just another Tuesday. The kind of day where things worked out, where meetings happened, where coffee got cold on polished desks while someone talked about projections. He imagined the office he didn't get to see, the chair he didn't get to sit in, the words he didn't get to say. The folder on his lap felt heavier now, like it knew it was useless. He didn't move until the shade shifted and the concrete warmed beneath him. Then, slowly, he stood up, adjusted his shirt, and walked 3 blocks to the corner store where Mr. Lawton's cousin worked the register. He used his last $2 to buy a bottle of water and a gas station sandwich that tasted like cardboard and shame. Back at the apartment, Mr. Lawton was asleep in his recliner, mouth open, TV blaring something about the news in Kansas. Quinton didn't wake him. He went into the kitchen, leaned on the counter, and stared at nothing for a long time. That night, he didn't talk much. When his friend Corey came home from his shift at the diner, Quinton just gave a thumbs up and said the interview went fine. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't want Corey trying to make him feel better with phrases like, "It wasn't meant to be," or "Your time will come." He just wanted silence. But silence wasn't the same as peace. Not when his thoughts kept circling the same moment. Why didn't I just say I had somewhere to be? What if she could have gotten herself out? What if she wasn't even that stuck? He didn't sleep much that night. He laid flat on the futon cushion, hands behind his head, listening to the pipes creak and the neighbor's dog bark on and off until the sky started to fade into grey. The next morning, he opened his email anyway. Nothing. He checked again after lunch. Still nothing. By the end of the second day, he gave up checking. He knew how this worked. They didn't call people who showed up late, even if they had a story. They hired the guy who was 5 minutes early, in a tighter suit, with a laptop bag that didn't fray at the seams. He started looking for another opening. Anything that didn't require college degrees or squeaky clean resumes. An overnight stocker job at the grocery store, a part-time janitor listing at a private school, cleaning offices, washing cars. Anything that meant forward. It was late afternoon on Thursday when the call came. He didn't recognize the number. Thought maybe it was a telemarketer or someone asking if he still had that old bike listed for sale on Marketplace. He let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hello?" A pause. "Is this Mr. Quinton Raye?" His voice stiffened a little. "Speaking. This is Alora Finch, assistant to Ms. Marin DuPont." Quinton stood up so fast he knocked over the chair. It clattered behind him, but he barely noticed. Yes, she continued smoothly, like she didn't hear the stumble. "Ms. DuPont would like to reschedule your interview for tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock sharp, at the same location. She'll be conducting it herself." Quinton didn't breathe for a moment. "Wait, did she say she wants to wait her?" "That's correct," Alora replied. "Is that time okay with you?" Yeah, absolutely, yes." "Wonderful. You'll check in with the front desk when you arrive." Before he could ask why or how, the line clicked. She was gone. Quinton just stood there in the kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear, mouth half open. Mr. Lawton, who'd woken up from the noise, raised an eyebrow from his recliner. "You all right, son?" Quinton looked at him and smiled for real this time. "I think so, Mr. Lawton. I think something just turned around." But he didn't know yet just how strange, surprising, and personal things were about to get. Quinton didn't sleep that night either, but for a different reason. His mind was sharp, electric. Every time he closed his eyes, it rewound to that crosswalk on Elm and 14th, the woman's expression, the brief smile, the way she disappeared without giving a name. He kept thinking, she remembered me? How? He hadn't even looked that good. Shirt wrinkled from sweat, tie slightly off-center. The only thing he had on him was sincerity, and apparently that had been enough. By 6:30 a.m. he was dressed and ready. Shirt re-ironed with the steam trick, shoes freshly shined with cooking oil. He'd even stitched the cuff with a borrowed needle and thread from the corner laundry shop. Nothing fancy, but it held. Corey offered to drive him this time. "No bus," he said, jingling his keys. "You're walking into that place on time and breathing normal. I got 20 on gas and half a granola bar for luck." The drive took 10 minutes. Quinton barely said a word the whole ride. At 8:47 a.m., he was standing in the building lobby, heart thumping. The receptionist gave a different look this time, not cold, not dismissive, just curious. "You can go up to the 6th floor. Ms. DuPont's office is at the end of the hall. No waiting room. No assistant walking him in. Just straight to the top." The elevator ride was quiet and fast. Quinton checked his breath, wiped his palms on his slacks, then knocked once. "Come in," came a voice. Warm. Direct. He stepped inside, and there she was, seated behind a glass desk with papers neatly stacked, phone off to the side. She wore a charcoal blouse with simple gold jewelry, same bobbed haircut, same calm confidence. "I was hoping it was you," she said, smiling. "Didn't know your name until 2 days ago, but I've been thinking about you." Quinton tried to find his voice. You're Ms. DuPont?" "Marin," she said, standing to shake his hand. "Call me Marin." He stepped forward and took her hand. Firm grip, steady eye contact. "I had no idea," he said. You didn't say anything." "I was late to a board meeting," she replied. "But after I got my heel unstuck and got upstairs, I saw the security footage. You at the front desk, sweaty, looking wrecked. That kind of thing sticks with you. He laughed nervously. Not exactly the first impression I wanted to make. You made the right one, she said. I've interviewed 100 people for the analyst program. Most of them are forgettable. They come in, say the right things, wear the right shoes, but they don't do anything real. She motioned for him to sit. I want to hear about you. No resume talk. Tell me who you are. Quinton took a breath. Then he started. He told her about growing up in Sepulpa, about losing his mom, dropping out of college to take care of things that couldn't wait. He told her about applying for jobs with no calls back, about couch surfing and showing up every day at the workforce office like it was a job in itself. I'm not trying to win points, he said. I just want to work. I want to contribute. Maren listened without interruption. She didn't take notes. She didn't check the clock. When he finished, she leaned back slightly. You ever worked with data? A little, he said. I taught myself Excel through YouTube. Tracked bills, groceries, budget plans. Made a little app mock-up for grocery stores. Tried to pitch it once, but didn't go anywhere. Show me. He blinked. What? Pull it up. I don't have a laptop. She slid one across the table. You've got 10 minutes. His hands moved slower than he wanted, but he remembered the links, pulled up screenshots he had saved in his email drafts, walked her through each tab, each function. She watched, never interrupting. When he finished, the room fell quiet again. You built that with no training, just trial and error. Maren smiled. I like people who figure things out. She stood up again. That'll be all for today. He stood too, unsure what that meant. No offer, no rejection, just a blank ending. But as he walked out, the thought flickered. Maybe this wasn't about a job anymore. Maybe she was testing something else entirely. The air outside the building felt different this time, not lighter, not heavier, just uncertain. Like it wasn't finished with him yet. Quinton walked down 6th Street in silence, phone clutched in his hand, replaying every second of that meeting with Maren DuPont. The way she watched him, the way she never flinched or filled the space with small talk. No sugarcoating, no promises. Just, that'll be all for today. He wasn't even sure it was an interview. It felt more like a read, like she was looking past what he said and into who he was underneath it all. Corey picked him up 20 minutes later. So? He asked, tapping the steering wheel. How'd it go? Quinton didn't answer right away. I don't know, man, he finally said. I think it went good, but also not. I can't tell if she was impressed or testing me. Maybe both. They didn't talk much the rest of the ride. That night, Quinton sat at the kitchen table, still wearing the same clothes, staring at a blank piece of paper. He wanted to write down everything she said, every look she gave, every question she didn't ask. But it all felt slippery, like trying to catch steam in your hands. He didn't sleep much again. But this time, it wasn't fear keeping him awake. It was curiosity. Why reschedule the interview herself? Why not just send him a polite rejection? Why ask him to show something, then end it without even a hint of what she thought? By morning, the questions were gnawing at him. Then the email came. Simple. Direct. Subject. Thursday. From Alora Finch, message. Ms. DuPont would like you to return Thursday at 1 p.m. She has something she'd like to show you. Bring nothing. He stared at the words, rereading them 5 times. Bring nothing? It sounded more like a summons than a second interview. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. When it did, he wore the same outfit. Pressed. Clean. Shoes shined again. This time he arrived 10 minutes early and sat in the lobby with his back straight and hands folded in his lap. At exactly 1 p.m., the elevator dinged. Alora stood waiting on the 6th floor. This way, she said. Quinton followed, his footsteps softer than usual. But instead of leading him back to Maren's office, Alora turned left and opened a different door, one that led into a small glass-walled conference room. Inside, Maren was seated at the head of the table, flanked by 2 men and a woman, all dressed in what he could only describe as money. Quiet, expensive clothing, watches that didn't tick, confidence that didn't ask for permission. Quinton's throat went dry. Come in. Marin said, gesturing toward the open seat. He sat, spine straight, palms sweating under the table. "This," Marin said, "is not an interview." One of the men glanced at the others, then at Quinton. "We asked Marin to bring someone who could think on their feet. Someone who could show good judgment under pressure. She said she had someone in mind." Quinton blinked. "Me?" Marin nodded. "That morning you helped me. You had no reason to stop. You were late. You had something at stake, but you chose someone else's problem over your own risk." The woman to her left added, "We run a community outreach arm within DuPont Grove. It's small but growing. We partner with schools, local businesses, mentorship programs. We've been talking about expanding leadership, bringing in people who know struggle." Quinton leaned in slightly, still trying to catch up. "So, is this a job?" "Not exactly," Marin said. "It's a trial, a 30-day placement. You'll work directly with our outreach coordinator, see how you handle the day-to-day. If it works, we bring you on full-time." Quinton sat frozen. He wasn't sure what to say. "This isn't about degrees," one of the men added. "It's about instinct, and you've already shown that." Quinton exhaled, long and slow. "I'll do it," he said. "All of it, whatever you need." The room finally cracked into smiles. "Good," Marin said. "Report to Building B, back entrance, 8 a.m., Monday." She stood and reached out her hand. "This is yours to lose, Quinton Raye." But he didn't know yet that this trial would push him harder than anything he'd faced before, and that someone in that room had already decided to make it harder. Quinton walked out of the building that Thursday feeling like he'd just been handed something fragile, something he wasn't allowed to drop, even once. It wasn't a job offer, not in the traditional sense. It was more like a dare, a test disguised as a favor. He replayed the words in his head. "This is yours to lose." That phrase stuck with him, because it didn't sound like trust. It sounded like warning. Still, Monday morning came fast, and Quinton was up before sunrise. He didn't wear the suit this time. The email said, "Dress ready to move." So he wore jeans, a clean tee, and the same shoes. Polished again, but starting to show wear in the soles. He tucked a notebook into his back pocket out of habit. Building B was older, tucked behind the corporate campus near the loading dock. It looked more like a storage facility than a corporate extension. A single glass door, a keypad, and a taped paper sign that read, "Community Team, use back entrance." When he walked in, the place didn't match anything he expected. Long tables, stacks of donation bins, faded posters about food drives and job fairs. A whiteboard with a schedule written in 4 different handwriting styles. Someone had drawn a smiley face next to Wednesday youth meeting. Behind a desk sat a tall woman with copper curls tied back in a loose knot. She wore work boots, a faded polo shirt, and thick-rimmed glasses. "You must be Quinton," she said, standing up. "Yeah, you're the outreach coordinator." "That's me, Jessa Barron. Been here 6 years, long enough to know how wild it can get." She reached out to shake his hand, and then gestured around the room. "This is home base. It looks like chaos, but it works. You'll be shadowing me. We've got 4 active partnerships this month. Youth mentorship, senior meals, neighborhood cleanups, and the Second Start program. That last one's for guys like you, people trying to get back in." Quinton raised an eyebrow. "Like me? No offense," she said, cracking a grin. "It's a good thing. We want people who get it, who've lived it." They spent the morning sorting donated clothes and fielding calls from local schools. By noon, Quinton was hauling folding tables to a rec center on 38th Street. By 3, he was scrubbing graffiti off a fence with a dozen high school volunteers. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt real. Jessa worked him hard. No shortcuts, no special treatment. She didn't say much about Marin or the corporate office, just gave him tasks, watched how he handled them, and moved on. That first week blurred by. Every day was different. He learned how to build spreadsheets, write grant updates, wrangle teenage volunteers, and diffuse tension between community members who hadn't trusted do-gooders in years. But by the second week, things got complicated. On a rainy Tuesday, Quinton was assigned to oversee a prep meeting at the Second Start shelter. Jessa was out sick, and someone had to step in. "I'm trusting you with this," she'd told him over the phone. "Don't just follow a checklist. Talk to them. Hear them." So he did. He shook hands with every resident in that shelter, asked about their days, sat through complaints about the food, listened to a man named Vernon explain how he lost everything after one medical bill. Quinton felt it, deep in his gut. He'd been close to this once. One wrong step, and he might have been Vernon. After the meeting, he helped clean up and made a note to report back everything to Jessa. But the next day, he got called into a conference room by someone he'd never met. Rodney Hales, one of the 3 men from the earlier round table. "Take a seat," Rodney said, flipping through a manila folder. "I've been hearing about you." Quinton sat slowly, unsure where this was headed. Rodney closed the folder and looked him dead in the eye. "I want to be clear. This isn't a guaranteed job. You're here because Maren thinks there's something in you. That doesn't mean you've proven anything yet." Quinton nodded. "I understand." Rodney leaned forward. "Do you? Because what you're doing is the easy part. Showing up, smiling, lifting boxes. Anyone can do that. What happens when things go sideways?" Quinton didn't answer right away. He knew this wasn't a question for his resume. "I adapt," he said finally. "I don't quit." Rodney studied him for a moment longer. "Good. Let's see if you mean that." But Quinton had no idea that the real test was already in motion, and it had nothing to do with lifting boxes. The next morning, Quinton arrived at Building B just before 7:45. Jessa still hadn't returned. Flew, apparently. And someone named Caden, a junior coordinator with more attitude than experience, was holding down the front desk. "Second Start called," Caden said, sipping an energy drink without looking up. "They're short on hands again. Said they asked for you specifically." Quinton nodded. "All right, I'll head there now." He grabbed a supply kit from the back. Paper goods, hand sanitizer, printouts for the resource board, and made the 20-minute bus ride across town. When he got there, something felt off. The air was tense. The usual volunteers weren't around. A few of the residents he'd chatted with earlier that week were pacing the lobby, whispering low. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Vernon, the man who told him about losing everything after one medical bill. Vernon looked frustrated, holding a clipboard and muttering under his breath. "You all right?" Quinton asked. Vernon looked up. "Man, they're about to throw out 3 people. Paperwork stuff. Said they didn't sign forms from last month, but none of them got the forms in the first place." Quinton frowned. "Who said that?" Vernon motioned toward a back room. "New admin. Doesn't even know half the names here." Quinton didn't know if he was supposed to get involved, but something didn't sit right. He went to the office, knocked, and stepped in. A young woman at a desk, mid-20s, with a badge that read Tina Brost, Admin Coordinator, looked up. She was typing furiously. "Can I help you?" "I heard there's an issue with some of the residents' paperwork," Quinton said carefully. "Yeah, 3 of them failed to update their eligibility forms. They were supposed to get them signed last month. No form, no stay. It's policy." Quinton paused. "Do you know if they received the forms?" Tina sighed. "Look, I just started here. I'm going off records. If it's not in the file, it doesn't exist." He didn't want to argue. He wasn't staff. Not really. But these weren't just names on a list. They were people he'd met. People who needed a roof more than rules. He walked back to the front room and found Vernon again. "Do you know where those guys are now?" "They're on the back patio, probably packing." Quinton went straight to them, an older man with a limp, a woman with 2 kids, and a teenager who couldn't have been more than 19. "You don't have to leave yet," he said. The woman looked up, eyes glassy. "They told us to go." "Not yet. I'm making some calls." He stepped aside, took out his phone, and called Jessa, even though she was sick. She picked up on the 3rd ring, voice raspy. "You all right?" "I need help," he said. "They're about to evict 3 people at Second Start over missing forms, but it sounds like they were never given the paperwork in the first place." "Hold on," she said, coughing. "Check the brown file cabinet behind the front desk. Bottom drawer. Look for resident logs from March. If the forms were distributed, there'll be signatures." Quinton ran back inside. Tina looked up. "What are you doing?" "I just need to check something. It'll take 2 minutes." She didn't stop him. Maybe she didn't care. Maybe she didn't believe he'd find anything. But in that bottom drawer, behind a stack of outdated brochures, was a March logbook. He flipped through pages until he found the names. 3 lines, all marked with NA, forms not printed. He took a photo of the page, printed a copy with the office printer, and brought it straight to Tina. She stared at the paper for a second, then looked up at him. "I didn't know." "You do now." Tina didn't say thank you, but she didn't argue either. By noon, the 3 residents had their updated forms, a new deadline to return them signed, and a spot still waiting for them. Vernon clapped him on the back. "Man, I don't know who you are, but you got it. We need more people like you." Quinton just smiled. He didn't tell anyone about it at first. Not Jessa, not Caden, not Maren. He didn't do it to earn points. He just couldn't walk away. But 2 days later, Maren called him into her office, and the first thing she said was, "Tell me about Tuesday at Second Start." Quinton sat across from Maren in her office again, this time in a chair that somehow felt smaller than before. She folded her hands, her expression unreadable. "I got 3 calls yesterday," she said, eyes fixed on him. "One from the shelter director, one from the admin you confronted, and one from a resident named Vernon." Quinton didn't flinch. He kept his voice calm. "They were going to push people out over forms they never got. I didn't think that was right." "It wasn't," Maren said. "You did the right thing. That's not why you're here." He blinked. "It's not?" She leaned back slightly. "I wanted to see if you'd mention it. You didn't. Not to Jessa. Not to Caden. Not to anyone. I didn't think I needed to. That's what impressed me." She stood, walked slowly to the window, then turned back. Most people, especially when they're being tested, feel the need to show how good they are. They mention every little win. You didn't. You handled it, and you moved on. Quinton shifted in his seat. "It wasn't about me. It was about them," she nodded. "Exactly." There was a long pause between them. One that didn't feel awkward, just heavy with meaning. "I didn't bring you here for charity, Quinton," she said. "I brought you here because we need people who understand why this work matters, not just how to do it." He looked at her, searching for the catch. "So, what now?" She walked back to her desk, pulled a folder from a drawer, and set it in front of him. "You know what our community branch looks like? On the ground, in the field. What you haven't seen is what it looks like when we build from the inside." He opened the folder. Inside were blueprints, schedules, grant plans. A brand new community program. Lift Tulsa, a citywide partnership between DuPont Grove and 3 other local orgs. She continued, "We're launching this in 3 months, and we need someone who can bridge both sides, the boardroom and the street. Someone who can walk into a bank at 10 a.m. and a food pantry at 3 p.m. and not change who they are." Quinton raised an eyebrow. "You want me to run it?" "No," she said. "Not yet. That'd be too much, too fast. But I want you in the room. I want you learning everything. Strategy, funding, people management. I want to build you up for something bigger." He stared at the folder again. "This doesn't feel real," he said. "I know," she replied. "It didn't for me either when I got my first shot. But someone gave it to me. I'm giving it to you." Quinton closed the folder slowly, still wrapping his head around it. Then she said something he didn't expect. "You're going to meet people who underestimate you. Some won't say it, but you'll feel it. They'll wonder if you belong. And every time they question it, they'll be telling on themselves, not you." Quinton's throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond to that. She went on, quieter now. "I've been in rooms where I was the only woman. Rooms where the money talked over me, and the power ignored me. I stopped waiting for approval. So should you." He looked up. "Why me, though?" Maren walked around the desk and leaned on its edge. "Because when I was stuck on the street, in heels I regret buying, looking helpless, you didn't hesitate. You didn't even ask who I was. You just helped." A beat passed. "That tells me more than any resume ever could." Quinton stood slowly. Then I'm in. I'm all in. She extended her hand, not as a test this time, but as a promise. Good. We start Monday. Real work this time. You'll sit in on planning sessions, partner meetings, and strategy calls. Bring questions, bring opinions. He laughed. I've got both. Then we're in business. As he walked back through the hallway, past the glass doors and out into the warm Oklahoma sun, it hit him. This wasn't just a second chance. It was the first real one. But not everyone in the company believed he belonged there, and someone was already planning to make that painfully clear. The following Monday, Quinton arrived at DuPont Grove headquarters just before 8:00 a.m., not in work boots or jeans this time, but in a crisp navy shirt and slacks that Jessa had helped him pick out from a thrift store 2 days earlier. It's time they see what you already know, she'd said with a wink. Inside, the energy was different. He wasn't shadowing today. He wasn't lifting boxes or sorting canned goods. He was part of the planning team now, sitting at a table with people who had titles, budgets, and expectations. Big ones. The meeting started in the West Conference Room, a sleek space with polished tables, panoramic city views, and a projector quietly humming in the ceiling. Maren stood at the front, leading the presentation for Lift Tulsa. Next to her, a clean-cut man in a tailored blazer tapped through the slides. Quinton recognized him immediately. Rodney Hales. Rodney didn't look at him when he walked in, barely acknowledged him with a nod. Still, Quinton took his seat, opened his notepad, and kept his posture strong. Maren began. Our goal is to launch Lift Tulsa with 2 pillars, job training and community housing. We'll be working with 3 partner orgs and matching them with internal teams. This isn't just outreach, it's investment. She turned to face the table. And I've asked Quinton Raye to join these early meetings because he's already been doing the work, quietly, for weeks. His insight's going to matter here. That got some glances. A few stiff smiles. Rodney shifted his pen between his fingers. When Maren handed the floor over to discussion, Quinton stayed quiet at first, observing the rhythm. People pitched ideas, debated timelines, adjusted budgets. But when the topic turned to outreach, actual fieldwork, he cleared his throat. Can I say something? The room went quiet. Maren gave a small nod. Most of the people we're trying to help don't trust institutions. They've been told before that someone's coming to fix things. But those people usually leave by the second week. If this is going to work, we can't just send flyers or launch a nice-looking site. We've got to show up, over and over, until it doesn't feel like charity. It feels like a relationship. A woman across the table nodded thoughtfully. Another scribbled something in her notes. Rodney, however, spoke up. Quinton, I appreciate the sentiment, but this is a high-budget initiative. We can't afford to center everything on soft trust building. There are deadlines, deliverables. Quinton didn't flinch. Then we're building something that'll crumble the second we leave. Rodney said nothing, just looked toward Maren. She smiled. That's exactly why he's here. After the meeting, as the room cleared, Rodney caught Quinton by the coffee table. You're walking a fine line, he said quietly. Maren's backing you now, but eventually people are going to ask what makes you qualified to be here. Quinton met his gaze. Maybe they should ask what made you forget why this place was built in the first place. Rodney gave a cold smile, tapped his cup, and walked away. Quinton didn't tell Maren about it. Didn't need to. He wasn't here to get caught up in office politics. He was here because people like Vernon, the mother with 2 kids, the teen on the shelter patio, they deserved more than systems built from spreadsheets. That week, he jumped into the work with both feet. He sat in on budget sessions, learning how money actually moved between partners. He spent afternoons mapping local neighborhoods in need of Wi-Fi hotspots and job support. He built a communication plan for the new mentorship program and even stayed late to help rewrite the intake forms for better clarity. One night, while locking up after everyone else had left, he caught a glimpse of himself in the dark glass of the lobby door. Same face, same eyes, but standing straighter now. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was building something. And for the first time in years, he believed, truly believed, that this path could lead somewhere. But while Quinton worked late to help others, someone else had started poking through his records, digging for something they could use to knock him down. It was a quiet Thursday evening when it came to a head. Quinton had just wrapped up a long meeting at the local rec center. The youth mentorship program was finally moving forward, funding secured, volunteers prepped, and pilot dates on the calendar. He stayed late to lock up, then walked back to the office to drop off a few signed forms. As he reached his desk in Building B, there was a folded envelope sitting on his keyboard. No name, no note. Inside, a printout of his arrest record from 2 years ago, an unpaid parking ticket that spiraled into a suspended license and eventually a short overnight stay in county jail when he got pulled over during a job delivery. He'd tried to explain it during past job interviews. Most didn't get past that line on the background check. Now, someone at DuPont Grove had dug it up and dropped it on his desk. He stared at it for a long minute, jaw tight, heart beating slower than usual. Then he tucked it into his folder and went straight to Maren's office. She was still there, her heels kicked off under the desk, reading grant proposals with a mug of cold tea beside her. He held out the envelope. She opened it, scanned the paper, then looked up at him without flinching. "I figured this might come up eventually," she said. "You knew?" "HR flagged it. I overruled them." "Why didn't you ask me about it?" "Because I wanted to see who you were now, not who you were on paper." She leaned back in her chair, her tone sharpening. "But someone clearly wants this to matter more than it should." "I'll find out who." Quinton stood still, that old weight creeping in, the one that says this is where it ends. "I don't want trouble," he said. "I just want to work." Maren shook her head. "You think this disqualifies you? Let me tell you something." She walked over to a cabinet, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a file of her own. "See this? When I was 24, I nearly lost my business over a loan I co-signed for someone who vanished the next month. Debt collectors showed up at my office. I sat in a courtroom next to my mother, praying the judge wouldn't liquidate everything." She dropped the file on the table. "You want to build anything that matters, Quinton? You better expect people to test your past, but they don't define your future. You do." He exhaled slowly. "So what now?" "Now," she said. "You get back to work, and I'll handle the rest." The next morning, Rodney Hales was reassigned, quietly without fanfare, to a different department in another state. Quinton never asked questions. Maren never gave answers. But the tension that had been hovering quietly disappeared. From there, things moved fast. The Lift Tulsa project launched. Quinton was named assistant coordinator within 3 weeks, then full coordinator 3 months later. He found himself managing teams, meeting with city leaders, and even returning to the same shelter he once helped save 3 residents from eviction. This time, not as a volunteer, but as a partner. At a press event one afternoon, a local journalist asked him what changed everything for him. He didn't hesitate. "A stuck heel," he said. People laughed politely, but he meant it. After the cameras left, he walked out onto the sidewalk, the same block where he'd first seen Maren struggling to free her shoe. He stood there for a moment, looking at the crack in the pavement. So much had started right there. He thought of the people who'd helped him, Mr. Lawton, Corey, Jessa, people who didn't have much, but gave what they could. And he thought of everyone who wouldn't stop to help someone unless there was a spotlight or a reward. That's what people forget sometimes. Kindness isn't supposed to be convenient. It's supposed to be true. He walked back to the office, passing 2 teenagers arguing on the corner. One of them dropped a folder of papers. Without thinking, Quinton bent down, picked them up, and handed them back. "Thanks, man," the kid said, nodding. "No problem," Quinton said, walking away. Because helping someone when no one's watching? That's the part of the resume that actually matters. If this story moved you, even a little, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that doing the right thing always counts. And if you're building your own story right now, keep going. The right people are watching.